Okay, so we now go to item D on the agenda, which is regarding the rate of subscription for affiliated societies, and I'll ask Andrew, our Treasurer, to speak on that.
Thank you, Chris. The subscription is currently £30 per representative member, and it has been this amount since the 1st of January 2014, which currently provides income to the general fund of about £6,000 or so. The subscriptions and other income from investments are intended to cover the cost of conducting the business of the council. Cost of venues has increased together with other costs of the annual meeting, committee expenses and other expenditure. Although we have had surpluses in the past because of the roadshow, there is generally an underlying deficit which really shouldn't be allowed to continue for longer than necessary. There is going to be considerable work planned by CRAG and subsequent committees to implement the new style CRO, and this proposal will bring in an increase of round about an extra £2,000 prior or pending the adoption of any proposals as a result of the CRAG report on the future funding. For the time being, deficits can be covered by reserves, but this shouldn't be allowed to continue indefinitely. We are, of course, continuing to monitor costs to keep them under control as far as possible. I therefore propose that we raise the subscription to £40 per representative from next January, which will be 4 years since the previous increase.
Christopher Omani Anzeb. I'm happy to second this motion.
Are there any questions for the Treasurer? In that case, we'll put the motion to increase the affiliation fee from current figure to £40 per representative per annum. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 2 over there. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Motion E regarding the Bell Rescue Fund. Now I ask Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Robert Wood, University of Bristol Society. The Bells Rescue Fund traditionally lent money to parishes to enable them to acquire rings of bells from redundant churches. The last such loan was made in 2007, repaid in 2010. The trustees feel that if the fund isn't being used, then it should be wound up. At the moment, the only outstanding loan was made in 2 tranches of £8,500 to Celtec for their purposes. So the trustees have agreed to wind up the fund. It simply remains for council to decide what to do with those funds. The total funds stand at just under £15,000. You'll see the figures on page 447 of the report. And we are therefore proposing that the use of those funds should be passed to the admin committee. The rules of council say that those funds must be used, if the fund is wound up, the funds must be used for bell restoration purposes. So I move the proposal.
Thank you, Robert. Helen, do you wish to speak?
Helen Webb, Ladies Guild. I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you. So just to make that quite clear, this is to wind up the fund in its existing state. The funds in hand of roughly £15,000 would be transferred to the control of the administrative committee, but they are restricted in their use for bell work. Anyone wish to speak on that? Tina?
Tina Stuckland, Scottish Association. I just have a question. Are there any plans for what you might do with that money? Are there any ideas or possibilities or potentials?
I'm sure lots of people can think of ideas. One possibility that occurs to me is that you will have seen the piece in the Marine World a while back from Simon Linford to transfer the bells from Hanley to some new home. If that scheme comes to pass, and that will depend on planning consent, I understand, then that might, for example, be a suitable use of some of these funds.
That would be an excellent idea, I think, or something like that, yes.
Katina, another one? Anthony, I think you were first.
Anthony Lovellwood, Salisbury Guild. In view of all the other things the admin committee have got to sort out, would it not be more helpful if this kind of sorted today, maybe by splitting it half and half between the Central Council BRF and, say, Celtic? And it, therefore, you know, that's another job that admin's going to have to look after. And it'd be one that would save us that job if the meeting today made the decision.
I believe there would be nothing under our rules which would prevent the admin committee through the officers making suitable payments to more than one activity.
I don't think this is going to take up a great deal of admin committee's time somehow.
Somebody over here? Yes, Jane Wilkinson.
Wilkinson, honourary member as the person who actually, in the absence through illness of Kenneth Felsted, had to propose the setting up of the Rescue Fund. The Rescue Fund has done a very good job over the years. It has now run its course and been overtaken by events. I hope there will be no move to give the money to the admin committee for admin purposes. It should go to Bell Restoration, and I heartily commend the move to close the fund today.
Thank you, Jane. Any other comments? Alison? Oh, Alison first, I think. Ladies first.
Thank you, Chris. Alison Hodge, Worcester, and follow-on words in our title. I just wonder whether the fund as it stands in use as a loan and therefore remaining in use potentially in perpetuity is rather different from using it for specific projects and effectively now consuming it. Whether in different financial climates actually having that reservoir to act swiftly with the capacity to loan is something that we're overlooking.
Yep. Peter Wilkinson. Yeah.
Peter Wilkinson, Chester Diocesan Guild and Chairman of the Council's Bell Restoration Committee. I'm more than happy with the proposal that Robert has put, that the assets be transferred to the purview of the officers for the time being. It has been suggested that some of or all of that could find its way into the Council's Bell Restoration Fund that the Bell Restoration Committee administers, and I could assure you if that is what transpires, there will be no shortage of takers for worthy projects to use that money. If the fund is restricted to loans only, and would obviously need to look at that, then that may be also something that we can look after within the Bell Restoration Committee arena if the officers would like us to.
Thank you, Peter.
All I can say to that is, as I haven't got the rules in front of me, but as far as I recall, it doesn't say that it can only be used for loans. I think you have the option of loans or grants.
Any other points? In that case, can we put, are you ready to put the motion? Are you in favour of the winding up of the Bell Rescue Fund? Any against? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we now have two motions, F and G, which emanate from the Methods Committee. And notwithstanding the fact that we have had major changes envisaged with this morning's votes, I believe that these immediate proposals are to enable things to take place from now, rather than waiting another year, and if in due course there are amendments submitted as part of the new decisions which Crag envisages, then that is so be it. But like so many things, you didn't want to hold things up with which we say a contrary vote this morning. I hope you'll look at these two in the spirit in which the Methods Committee have submitted them. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes, I will, in the interest of time, I'll try and be quick. I have discussed with members of the committee, and I think their view is they would like to proceed with these motions. Before we start on F, there is an error in the printed version, but it's shown correctly on there. It's actually Rule 15.4 we're talking about, not 16.4. Okay, so in the Crag presentations we had yesterday and today, Phil Barnes mentioned the importance of strategy and for having committees and working groups to have clear objectives to deliver against that. So Methods Committee agrees with that, and this is why we're proposing a more detailed set of terms of reference. So how does it fit with Crag? Well, we did word these motions before we saw the details of the Crag motions, but it's our belief that the Council will need a technical working group, and the terms that we're proposing here would form a good starting point for such a group. So the current terms of reference, if anybody wants to look at them, are very limited. They simply are to consider and advise on all questions from the interpretation of the Council's decisions relating to methods, calls and peal ringing. So we kept those, but added several other responsibilities. They're written up there. I hope they're fairly clear, so I'm not going to go through each one. But I thought I would highlight a couple of them and then address a couple of the questions that have been already asked about this motion in the ringing world and elsewhere. So the first thing I'm going to mention is it talks explicitly now about maintaining a library of named methods and also about resolving disputes related to method naming. So in his submission presentation this morning, proposal this morning, Phil pointed out these things have been highlighted as positives, or the method collection specifically had been highlighted as a positive in the Crag consultation, and also the fact that we used a standard set of method names throughout the world. So this is really to support that. The second item is I'm going to mention is the one at the end, which is about the promotion of an interest in technical and theoretical aspects of ringing. Of course, there are other things like the ringing theory mailing list, and the committee isn't seeking to replace that in any way, but we think it would be good to widen the general knowledge of ringing theory to a bigger audience, and in particular to engage the interest of younger ringers. They use this as a recruitment tool for a certain kind of young ringers anyway. So I think I probably should mention a couple of criticisms that have been made of the motion in the ringing world, which we have answered there. First is that this represents some kind of land grab for the committee as its scope goes beyond methods and talks about peals. As I said, that's in the current terms of reference, but we also sense the desire from Crag to consolidate the number of committees into fewer work groups, so it didn't seem to make sense to make the terms too narrow. The second concern that was raised by Don Morrison is that it gives additional powers to the committee, for example, its role in resolving method naming disputes. Now, I find this a bit of a puzzling concern. On the one hand, we get people complaining the committee isn't doing enough, but on the other hand, when we try and formalise what it should do, we get complaints about that as well. I'll just say that the principle of empowering committees to take their own decisions, subject to appropriate oversight, seems entirely consistent with the Crag motions that we voted for earlier today. And so with that, I would like to propose the motion. Thank you.
Peter. Mark?
It is seconded by Mark Davies, who actually isn't here in present today, so, but he's very keen, and Graham John also was involved in the wording of it, so he's going to come and help me answer any questions. Do you want to say anything, Graham? Or? Yeah.
Graham John from the Oxford Diocesan Guild. I'll just say that I'm probably responsible for triggering this in the first place because outside the committee and actually outside the council, which I only joined today, I looked at the existing rules and was rather puzzled that the Methods Committee's terms of reference didn't seem to include most of the things it actually did. So I wrote down a list of things which I thought it should do, and that is what has really materialised as this motion, is actually reflecting what the Methods Committee, or what most of us believe the Methods Committee should be doing, and it does encompass its existing role, which was purely to advise the Council on the decisions. So that's the background of this. I believe that even in the sort of crag situation, these are still things that need to be done. So whether they're done by the current Methods Committee or they're done by a work group, they still need doing. So it's still a part of the process as taking us forward to that step.
I'm right in saying that it gives you the freedom to discuss with those who will be working on the CRAG's proposals the greater freedom in terms of subject matter. Anyone wish to make any comments? John Harrison.
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. As the chairman of the committee, which a few years ago looked at its terms of reference, which were written before the war, subject to a tiny patch a few years ago, we looked at what we thought we should be doing within the wider remit, and we broadened our terms of reference. I think what the Methods Committee has done, they've done the same thing. They had a very narrow terms of reference, which, as Graham pointed out, didn't cover what they were actually doing. So they've stopped and looked and said, well, what should we be doing? And I see this as moving towards the new regime, where the work groups won't say, you've got a narrow line to follow. They'll say, the Council's mission would dividing into chunks, look around, don't just do what you're doing, think what else you should be doing that's worth doing. So I'm happy to support that.
Thank you, John.
Robert Brown, Devon Association. There's one phrase in there which has caused me a little bit of concern. Are you going to take on a censorship role in terms of naming of methods?
There is effectively a censorship role at the moment applied that's in the current decisions that allow the Council, allow this meeting to refer back a name if they don't think it's an appropriate name. It was originally intended for names that were, offensive in what they were. It's not our intention to do that. When we talk about adjudicating or arbitrating on method names, we're mainly concerned with the issue if two people name it on the same day. We have to decide which one actually got there first. It's that kind of thing. We're not proposing to go back and say, don't like the name you've chosen, except for there is one other area which I think comes up occasionally, which is in the area of method extension. I think most ringers generally agree that being able to call, seeing the relationship between Cambridge Major, Cambridge Royal, Cambridge Maximus is a sensible thing, and if somebody were to ring something at a different stage that wasn't related but had the same name, that would be bad. That's already covered by the current decisions anyway, so we wouldn't be doing anything special in the committee with regard to that.
Thank you, Peter. Stefan?
Stefan Gentek, Chester Diocesan Guild. I'm broadly in favour with the motion, but I just like to comment on the last four words on the second paragraph, or the main paragraph. To promote an interest in technical and theoretical aspects of ringing to ringers at large. I would suggest that could be removed, and that the Methods Committee could therefore maybe attract new people into ringing through an interest in technical and theoretical aspects of ringing, perhaps through mathematics and journals and stuff like that.
That was entirely what I was trying to get.
So I would suggest then perhaps to propose an amendment to remove those four words.
You mean you want to make it appeal to other non-ringers, effectively?
No, well, yes, so that you have the possibility to...
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to delete the word accept amendment to remove to ringers at large. Thank you. I assume my virtual seconder is happy with that as well.
We're having a proposed amendment to...
No, if I accept the amendment, that's it. You don't have to vote. If I accept the amendment, you don't have to vote on it.
You're happy, right?
So I'm trying to speed things up here.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? In that case, we have a motion which the proposers have accepted, the deletion of the last 4 words to ringers at large. So it's as printed on your sheet.
It's been deleted off the screen.
Oh, right. Just deleted off the screen, right.
Okay, good.
Yes, Peter?
So let's put it. Let's put it.
Can we put the motion, please? Are you in favour? Any against? Any abstentions?
Right, we needed a 2/3 vote, but I think that happened.
Yes. Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, motion G is... Here we go again. So motion G is to actually make some changes to the existing decisions. There are 5 parts to this that are independent of each other. Under the current rules, so they're following the consultation exercise we ran earlier this year. Under the current rules, the council has to vote on such changes, which is why we're putting the motion forward now. Each of these parts of the proposal relax some of the conditions currently in place concerning peals and methods. So there are no additional restrictions being added. Anything that meets the current requirements for peal or method will continue to do so if the motion is passed. So before carrying on, there is some criticism that this looks like continued tinkering of the current decisions instead of a complete rewrite. The main reason for putting the proposals forward now is that if they're passed today, they will take effect immediately. But also we expect that the new decisions will contain many substantive changes beyond what we currently have, and I think it's going to be easier to develop them if these principles of some of these decisions have at least been agreed to first. There have been explanatory notes showing what the before and after look like on our website. I will very quickly summarise them all. So the first one, change 1, is to allow methods that are false in the plain course. At the moment, methods have to be true in their plain course. There are about 10 in the collection that have been rung at the moment that are false in their plain course and are classed as non-method blocks. On our website, we've shown the new names or new titles they will get if the proposal is passed. So it does include Kent and Oxford treble bob minimus, which will now be 48 rows in the plain course, and now going to be, if passed, would be valid methods, and also 2 of the original particles, quarks, peals, that caused all the difficulties, I guess, some years ago, will now be classified as methods. Okay, so that's option number 1. Number 2 is about removing the requirement for bells to be audible outside the tower. That's not a methods thing, it's a peals thing, but it comes under the remit of what we were looking at. Several people asked for that, and it should be self-explanatory. I'll skip over number 3 because that's the more controversial one and come back to that in a minute. Number 4 is to reflect changes in the way, actually to reflect current peal ringing and peal conducting practice. So 2 of the decisions we have today are about the way you conduct peals. They say any shift or error shall be corrected immediately, and no error in calling shall be corrected later than during the change at which it would properly take effect. I abbreviated slightly. So a number of ringers commented to us that these weren't strictly adhered to in all peals, and they bring the general credibility of the other things into question. Also, there's some problems with what do you mean by immediately, right? So obviously, if it was, you can't correct it after it's happened. So what we thought, we've spent some time on the words of this, and this also came from external groups as well. So the proposed wording is shown there to put in something which actually isn't there at the moment, which is an exhortation to maintain a high standard of ringing. And we're saying all errors in ringing or calling should be corrected quickly rather than immediately. Okay, so that's that one. Now the last one, I'll come back to 3 in a minute. The last one is for a wider range of possible constructions of peals. Now this is a technical and complicated one, but really it's just completing a change that we agreed to last year, which was to allow 5,100 of doubles. There are some anomalies in the way that you could ring some kinds of 5,100s and not others, so this is correcting that. The details are in our paper if you're interested. But it's actually at another level, it's also giving us the opportunity to redefine what we mean by truth in compositions. there's this phrase n or n plus 1 times in there, which is something we think would be a useful phrase to include in the next set of definition-based decisions. Okay, I will now go on to number 3, which is about simulators. So this is probably the most controversial. In the consultation we did, 25% of people objected to this who replied. However, 50% of people were in favour. So that's why we are including it here. We were careful to choose the wording. We spent some time on precise wording of this because we didn't want to include situations where somebody just presses a button and starts the computer playing or something like that. So we've chosen the word simulated sound. You'll see it says there, Peal's run with simulated sound. And we're emphasising the need for human ringers and for the activity performed by those ringers to be the same as when a peal is run on conventional tower bells or handbells. So the analogy really in this respect it's like, imagine an organist giving a recital on an electronic organ rather than on a pipe organ. The organist is playing the instrument in the same way, it's just the means of the sound production that's different. So that's really what we tried to capture in A and B. We've also put in a bit that suggests that, well, that says that record lengths with simulators should be kept, or simulated sound should be kept separate from ones with non-simulated sound. Okay, so that's the end of what I was going to, introduction of this.
Would Lee want to say anything?
Would Lee want to say anything? There he is.
Lee Simpson, College is very happy to second the motion. I think it's allowing some things that lots of people are doing already.
Okay. Can I suggest, well, first of all, I think we'll take it's such a long thing. We'll take it section by section, the 1 to 5 sections, and are there any? First of all, are there any? We'll take section 1. Are there any comments on that, please? John Harrison.
Coming. It's just coming. No, it's coming.
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. This is actually a general comment that applies to all, including one, and it might speed things along. I've long been a critic of the continual patching of a defective system. However, we now have a firm commitment that there will be a new ship. They've already designed the patches for the next year, so I think we should just let them fit the patches, sail the ship until it's scrapped in a year or whatever's time, and then we'll have the new ship. So, despite being against another patch in general, we now have the commitment to do the job properly. Let's, we've done the work, let's have the next year a little bit nearer to what it should be than what it was before.
John, any other comments at the back there? All right. Yeah.
Andrew Johnson, Winchester Diocesan Guild, Winchester and Portsmouth. For the true peals which are false in the plain course, every time you make a decision, people take it as an excuse to step over that line. So how long before someone just has 2 courses of plain bob doubles or plain bob major as a new method?
Okay, any other questions on this one, or shall I answer? Andrews. Oh, it's one of
Stephen Petman, Suffolk Guild of Ringers. Just one quick question about will the non-true methods be listed in separate categories to the true methods? Because I think it may cause some confusion to people who are perhaps not as experienced as some of us at looking through these things and using computer proving for anything, be ring or whatever.
Any more? Peter, do you want to answer?
Okay, so answer to the 2 questions. The first one is the behaviour that Andrew described can already be done effectively today. People can ring things that are really... Well, there are various ways of casting methods that are different, and people don't do it. Yeah, if you really want to do that, I guess you can, but I don't see that's a reason for excluding things like Kenton Oxford treble bob minimus. Okay, we will deal with that as it arises. The other question, my personal view is that we should, in the collection, put a warning against methods that are false in the plain course so that people know that they can't call wrong home wrong for them, for example, and expect it to work in the normal way. So I don't think that's a problem with that. You got a problem with that, Lee? No. Okay, good.
Thank you. Any more points on the first section? Can I ask a leading question at this point? John Harrison has suggested that we might take the whole proposal, G, as a whole, as being a step forward towards the eventual aims of CRAG, which were outlined this morning. It will give additional freedoms as from now. Can I ask the view of the Assembly whether you'd be willing to take the whole of proposal G in one go?
Just
yes?
Yes.
Sorry? Right, okay. Well, in that case, we'll go back to Plan A. Can I ask, are you... yeah, sorry. Well,
you can propose we move straight to a vote.
Yeah, just go straight to a vote. That's one person who's got an issue. You'll just get to the vote.
No, there's more than one, Doug. Yeah. Right, can I ask, are you willing to approve section G1 as proposed? Those in favour? Well, you can, Fred. Right. If you want to treat it in that way, in that case, sorry.
They discuss them separately.
All right. Discuss section 2 then. Any comments on section 2? Yes. So.
For this one, what effect does it have on record length peals in arranging that they're actually audible for people wanting to hear?
Record length peals have to have an umpire anyway now if they're over 10,000 changes, so this wouldn't affect that.
Well, no, I was saying if I was an interested party, if I held the previous record, I might want to hear... If I held the previous record, I might want to hear that this performance was actually better.
Is a requirement to give notice of record lengths. The person, you could then come along and I'm sure arrangements could be made.
Andrew Astman, Yorkshire Association. Really this applies to both 2 and 3. I consider peals to be performances and they should be capable of being heard by people who want to hear them outside the tower. And we've just also got a leaflet on our chairs which reminds us that bells are a sign of hope and a source of comfort. People want to hear church bells. Why do we have to hide what we do?
There's somebody at the back here, over there. That's it.
Pat Hickey, Gloucester and Bristol. Going back to the previous comment, I think the point has been covered by the fact that peals rung with artificial sound will be recorded as such. I don't think that there's any problem for people with existing record lengths. They will still be record lengths on open bells.
Yes, sorry. Yes, okay.
Yeah. Jeff Ladd, Durham University Society. I'm currently fronting a project to install a ring of bells in a church in France. I would love to be able to invite everybody here to come and ring peals on them. I would love for the residents not to be able to hear those peals. So I'm sure there are churches and other towers where it's very appropriate. I take Andrew's point about ringing being a performance, but I think there are places where it's appropriate for the bells not to be heard at all outside, never mind quietly, and I'd be perfectly happy to open the church to people to hear them inside.
Veronica, over here.
Veronica Downing, Suffolk Guild. Yes, my point follows on from what's just been said. We have to ring long lengths using sound control. And where are you drawing the line? Because inside, the ringers who are ringing can hear everything very clearly. People who want to come inside the church to listen to the ringing can hear it. But we have to have the ringing dampened so that complainants outside can't be disturbed.
Okay. Further points?
Can I comment? One thing we could consider in the future is a requirement to record internally the record length, so there's actually a record of it. I don't know if that's a thing that people might find useful, but I just put that forward as a suggestion, not as a proposal now, obviously. Then you'd actually have a record for history of the record length of whatever it was, if anybody really wanted to listen to it all. With today's technology, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Peter? We've gone to, sorry, one over there. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Susan Welsh, Yorkshire Association. As a ringer, I completely agree with what you're trying to bring in. It just concerns me that we're opening the door for incumbents possibly in the future to say, well, you don't need to make a noise, you can do it on a simulator, once we've established that precedent in other places.
Thank you for that point. Move on to section 4. Peal. 3, yes, a 3, sorry.
No, we've done 3, 4.
We have had some comments on simulated sound. Section 4. And this is about standards of ringing. Fred's got the point there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fred Bone, Essex Association. We're told that the existing requirements on what I consider the etiquette of peal ringing are widely ignored. I've spoken to a number of people I would consider, excuse me, people I would consider to be leading peal ringers, and they all have told me that they disapprove of this change. At the moment, the requirement, as you can see in your copy of the decisions, which is on your, which was put on your chairs this morning, is that mistakes should be corrected immediately, and that calls are must not be put in retrospectively. I consider what we've got here to be woolly in the extreme, and I would like to propose deleting part 4 from this motion. Thank you.
Fred? Want to respond to that, Peter?
Well, actually, I think you should ask if there's a seconder, but I didn't actually say they were widely ignored. I just said they weren't strictly adhered to in all peals.
Is there a seconder?
You need to ask.
Is there a seconder for that proposed amendment?
Yes.
Yes. Andrew Johnson. Right, we have a proposer and seconder to delete section 4 from the proposal. Those in favour of the amendment to delete section 4 from the proposal, which is affecting the standard and correction of ringing. Right. Those against the amendment? Thank you. That's clear the amendment is lost. Can we carry on with just the last, discussing the last section 5? Peter, do you want to say any more about the triples?
Not really. I expect Andrew's going to object to this one, but so, as I said, this is to allow you, at the moment you can ring a 5,100 of doubles consisting of 42 extents and a touch of 60 changes. What we'll now let you do with this proposal is to ring 41 extents and a touch of 180. It makes it more regular, removes an anomaly, and it allows you to ring a rotation that counts, and it's the same rows that you'd be ringing. So that's one part of it. The other part is it allows to introduce this concept of a true touch now being you ring n or n plus 1 times, but not n or n plus 2 times. Okay.
Peter, any comments? Yes, again, Andrew.
Again, Andrew Johnson. Again, I object to this one. The importance of extents in ringing has been around right since the time of Fabian Stedman, of bringing all the changes once and once only, and the extension of doing that multiple times. And this is totally against it. And as I pointed out in my letter in the Ringing World, this would allow people to ring a peal of granted triples and deliberately to repeat a course just to get queens to come up twice. And then further on, they get titums, which is a bit uneven. So he says, well, we'll just repeat that course so it comes up again. And then near the end, he misses out a bob, says, well, we'll just repeat that course and put it in the right place. And it's just totally against the completeness and truth in change ringing.
Any other comments? John Harrison?
Presumably, Andrew, given the sanctity of the extent, would have felt that in the 18th century they should not have contemplated ringing less than 40,320 for a peal of major. I think there's a degree of practicality. Certainly the extent is part of the evolution. But to say that you can't ring a peal between 5,040 of triples and 10,080 of triples does seem to me completely nonsense. You can ring a long peal of minor, you can ring a long peal of major, but not to do it to triples. So I think this is just a little bit of common sense, and Andrew's suggestion, whilst I can understand the sentiment, I think we do have to move on.
John, any further comments? Yes, over the back.
David Smith, ANZAB. Sorry to go backwards. Could I seek a clarification of motion 3? Just looking at the wording up there, it appeared to state something about simulators on tower bells. It doesn't seem to make it clear what happens if you ring on a simulator where, from a human point of view, the action is exactly the same as on a tower bell, but there isn't actually a bell.
Peter? Did you reply to that?
Yes. This would include that situation where there is no physical bell as of a metal object up there. That would be my interpretation of it.
Right. Robert Perry.
Yeah, Robert Perry, Truro Guild. I'm sorry if this appears pedantic, but this is the Central Council of Church Bell Ringers, and I fail to see why we're spending so much time in debating something which is highly unlikely, I would have thought, to happen in many, if any, churches.
Somebody, was there another? Paul, did you want to? No? Okay. Any more? Okay. So there's no more comments. Can I suggest that... yes, sorry.
Chris Turner, Lincoln Guild. Can I just have clarification of that last point on motion 3, which I thought we were coming back to? Your definition of a bell, a Saxby simulator, for instance, would be classified as a bell, would it? A peal would be allowed to be rung on a Saxby simulator.
The analogy I gave was an electronic organ versus a pipe organ. So in a pipe organ, you'll actually have, so you can see up there, you've actually got metal pipes, and the sound comes out of those. Okay, and you ring on a real tower bell, there's a metal object that swings, and you get the sound out of that. Right. What this is saying is that we're talking about a situation where the person pulls the rope, just like the organist plays the keys, but the method of sound production is not by a metal object being hit, a bell-shaped metal object being hit by a clapper. Okay, so however that works, there may be a real bell there, but it's tied, or there may be some other kind of simulator, some other kind of object there that simulates the physical behaviour, just like the organist's keyboard simulates the touch of the organ. Okay? Yes. So the answer is yes, then. Sorry.
Another, yes, again?
Just going back, Andrew Johnson again, just going back to this one, I've just had a thought. Does this also allow the flower pots again, as that is a kind of a simulated bell sound that comes out of a flower pot?
now you're asking a question of what's the sound, how close does the sound have to be to the sound of a bell, I think. This illustrates the need for kind of judgment on... I don't think we should try and change the words from what we've currently put. I think it's close enough to what we're expressing the spirit of what we're trying to do. I personally don't think there's any problem with ringing on flower pots, provided the sound produced is clear and distinct, that you can actually tell the notes apart from each other. I'm speaking as someone who has rung Peal on a flower pot, by the way.
One more over here, and then Angela.
Jeff Ladd, Durham University Society. Following on from that, I was going to ask, does the sound actually have to be that of a bell at all, or could it be, for instance, 8 words from Ulysses? I could see that people might want to do that. There are precedents for doing that in music. You've only got to listen to the music of Steve Reich. Would you count a Peal of Grants and Triples? It didn't actually sound like bells at all.
Jeff, if you'd like to do that, I don't think the Central Council should stop you.
Angela?
Actually, Alison, but
sorry.
Chris, I accept Angela as well these days. Alison Hodge, Worcestershire and District. I'm just looking at that, and I'm no keenly on this sort of thing, but what about the number of people, the human ringers, in relation to the number of bells? Convention is 1, sometimes it's double-handed, similarly in handbells, 2 each. Is there any scope here for saying that one person has rung a peal with simulated bells, so on?
Are there any more comments? Otherwise, I'm going to ask that the motion be put, that motion G, the 5 parts. Are you willing to approve motion G in its entirety? Those in favour? Against? That's clearly carried. Thank you very much for your forbearance in a difficult technical issue.
Thank you.
Now we come to the receipt of committee reports. I would say 2 things. First of all, the committee chairman should be ready at the microphone to present and answer any questions on their reports, respective reports. This is, ladies and gentlemen, your opportunity to question omissions and future plans of committees, should you so wish to do. This was one of the points which the Cragg report made about being accountable. I think as I said, we sometimes just take things on the nod. If there is anything that you wish to ask the committee chairman, please, this is your chance to do so. So we'll start off with the Administrative Committee. Mary.
Right, thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to apologise to you and to the members for a few typographical errors in the supplement. Peter's already referred to one of them. There was a bug in the software, presumably introduced to correct something else, and this bug was corrected after we'd gone to press. I'd particularly like to thank Fred for typesetting the supplement in order to save time and effort by the Ringing World staff, who were, of course, especially busy just after the Easter bank holidays with producing the weekly edition. They do have to get the regular paper out. And I'd like to thank Robert, Chris and Jackie for their assistance to us. Thinking of the supplement in the years ahead, could I just ask for a quick show of hands on how many of you are using the paper version today and would continue to need this in future? Are you using paper? Thank you, that's a majority. Right, okay. Right, okay, could I draw attention to the forthcoming meeting with Historic England and the Church Buildings Council on the 25th of July? And please contact me or Christopher or David Kirkcaldy as soon as possible about any matter which should be placed on the agenda at that meeting. Once again, we attempted to keep the central administrative costs of this meeting to the minimum by only distributing printed sets of papers in advance to those members without email. And this continues to save several £100, which would otherwise be spent on copying and postage. So I'd like to thank you for supporting that. For the benefit of new members, I should perhaps explain that there's normally only one physical mailing a year when the brochure for the annual meeting is dispatched. So do please let us know if you change your email address. Carol and I are not actually psychic. We hope it appears that way, but it's not actually true. It also helps if you can ensure that cccbr.org.uk is whitelisted for email, and if you can make sure also that your society secretary whitelists CCCBR addresses. With that, I formally propose adoption of the Administrative Committee report.
Mary.
Christopher Omani Anzab, I've been asked to formally second the motion to adopt the report, and in so doing, I'd like to highlight members' attention in the section emboldened reform of the Council and of the Administrative Committee, and there's a section in there that discusses future Council meetings. I'm inviting Andrew Wilby and Ernie DeLay-Runciman to step up to help talk about arrangements for Lancaster next year. I'm hoping that everybody has now received one of these on their seats, which is a little brochure concerning that. If not, if I could ask the stewards and tellers perhaps, there's a box up here up the front, and if anybody's not seen one of these, raise your hand and we've got a box up the front here with spares. So Andrew and Ernie are going to talk quickly about arrangements for next year, but I mean the key thing is what we took on board in the reform agenda, that the Lancaster meeting is arranged jointly by the Admin Committee and in this instance the Lancashire Association. It is in May. The formal business of the meeting is designed to be shorter. The overall weekend is going to be more all-inclusive. With a broader appeal, and planning is well advanced. So over to Andrew and Ernie.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'd like to thank the Vice President for doing my job for me. Very kind. You'll see from your brochure that there's been quite a lot of work put into this, and it's part of the movement to try and turn this conference, this meeting, into much more of a conference, because I think some of us are very conscious that a lot of people here sit there staring at the back of somebody's head and don't really get that much chance to take part. And a couple of years ago at Hull, when we did have those breakout sessions, I think one of the significant things that happened was pretty well everybody on the council got to speak. And I think there's a feeling that that's the way we should be moving. You'll see that from the brochure that it becomes a two-day event. There's something else behind that. It takes an awful long time to create a climate of opinion in a body like this when you only meet once a year. And it's really healthy and really good if you can actually get together at the minimum for 2 days and be able to talk, meet in the bar and converse. And that's something a lot of us would like to see this council improving on. So there you are. It becomes a 2-day event. That leads on to the other part of this, in that the research showed that we could find one academic institution that would take us at the Maybank holiday, and that's at Lancaster. All the others we researched, it's term time. Now the reason for going to an academic institution is they are considerably cheaper than other conference facilities, and the sort of packages you can get will actually reduce the amount of money we all spend, because when you add up the meals and the hotels and what have you, you'll find, if you actually do the sum properly, you'll find it's quite expensive, particularly here in Edinburgh, of course, this year. So that's the thinking behind it, and the figures on the back of the card are correct at the time of publication, but they are subject to 1 or 2 bits of variation. One of which was we did make an allowance for part of your subscription to be part of your conference costs in these costings. Well, by raising the subscription, we can go back over that again and just see where that leads us, because I think there may be scope to effectively reduce the upfront cost to you, because you'll already have paid a bit more in your subscription. Having said that, Ernie.
Right.
Thank you, Andrew.
As you see, it'll start on the Saturday. We're hoping some committees will provide seminars and workshops. I know Tower Stewardship Committee are looking to a workshop, and I've been talking with Towers and Belfries. They're talking about a maintenance workshop, so I will be talking to other committees. On the Sunday, we're not going to have a Songs of Praise as such, but we're hoping that the members of the council will adopt a local tower to help them with service ringing. We're hoping to hold the AGM of the Ringing World on the Sunday, but that's with further negotiation with the Ringing World to see what's going to happen there. We're looking for a keynote speaker to help us on the Sunday, very similar to what we had yesterday with Sir Tony Baldry. We have some feelers out at the moment, and then the formal opening of the council will be on the Sunday with the minutes, the matters rising, the obituaries, etc., followed by the dinner and the reception and the dinner. Then on the Monday, more of a workshop-based meeting, obviously with the formal motions. I think we're going to have quite a bit of work now next year with the changes to the rules, etc. We're asking the local association to give us an overview of what's happening in ringing in the area, and a number of breakout sessions as well. Right?
Thank you, Ernie. Any questions on the floor?
And can I say also, moving forward beyond 2018, as alluded to earlier today, looking towards a mini roadshow style, moving the meeting to September so that we can avail ourselves of better conference fees. So watch this space. And with that, I second the adoption of the report.
Thank you. Are you in favour of the adoption of the Admin Committee report? You have a question, Robert?
Robert Perry, Truro. Two things. Firstly, on the idea of the two-day conference, that has no trouble for me personally, but when I was at work, I was involved with an organisation, a national organisation, which held such conferences, and as time went by, colleagues from in my line of work from elsewhere in the country found it increasingly difficult to get time to travel, in most cases considerable distances, and be away from their offices for 2 days. So, although, as I say, it causes me personally no problem, and indeed I welcome the new concept, I do wonder whether it might deter some members from being present, certainly on both days. Secondly, as to the possibility of changing the date of the 2019 meeting, we did discuss this, I think, last year, or maybe it was a whole meeting. Either way, the idea of meeting, I thought the idea of meeting in the autumn had been rejected, so I'm a little bit surprised to see it back on the agenda now.
When it was discussed at the Hull meeting, Robert, yes, absolutely. It did go to the vote and rejected, not by a strong majority. But again, if I use the Crag colour coding on what's within the gift of the council as it stands at the moment, it's not the kind of thing that actually needs a vote.
Right. John, come on. John Harrison.
My recollection of that meeting was that because it was desired not to put on too much at once, the proposal to move the date was put forward without the exposure, the full thinking behind it that Andrew's just done in terms of dates and accommodation and so on. And the message I remember from that meeting is, don't ask us to move the date without giving us a good reason. Now we've got the good reason. There's a logic behind it, which those of us who'd been in the admin committee were already aware of. I think the problem at that meeting was that the whole rationale for moving wasn't clear, and the members, predictably, some said I can't go, I mean, the usual problem. So I don't think we should read too much into that vote, which was based on an inadequate presentation of why we wanted to move it. We've now got a much more solid case of why it's worth moving, and I think we should judge it on that basis.
Thank you for that comment, John. Can I have your approval to the adoption of the... Somebody else? Oh, right. Yes, Roland.
I'm assuming it's switched on. I was one of those that spoke against moving it. Oh, sorry, I was no better. Roland Backus, Bath and Wells. I was one of those that spoke specifically against moving the meeting to September or early September, because it's one of the times of the year when a lot of families and things like that, they're getting ready for their children to go to school, to college, etc. And one of the reasons that particular weekend that you talked about and chose, why was it a quiet weekend? Because of all the other things that outside of ringing that are going on in families and that. And if we want young family or younger members to take part in this, then they're not going to be available at that time of year.
Thank you, Roland. Any other comments? Neil? Neil first, and
Neil Dodge, Suffolk Guild. I just wondered if the area of the location of the 2019 meeting has been decided.
We've got a couple of quotations from a couple of university venues, but I need also to be chatting with the territorial associations in those areas before, so if I can keep my powder dry a little longer.
Doug, can I just add something there? I think the concept we have is that the meeting would move around the country. It would not draw on the resources of Guild, who ought to be putting their time and effort into doing other things. Organising a council meeting gets easier for a body when you're doing it year by year by year, because it's just sort of more of the same. You know what you're doing. But the idea is to move the meeting around the country and use the event to do what good we can in the different locations with the local guilds.
Thank you, Andrew. Doug, do you want to...
Yeah, Doug Davis, Kent County Association. Just to follow on about the timing of September and things. Actually, as someone with 2 young children and a busy family life, this weekend is actually more problematic than any other, because it's half term, it's bank holiday, and actually my family would much rather I be there at home with them than they would if I happen to disappear when the kids are going back to school. So, you know, I think that's an invalid argument really for families these days.
Can I just add to that? When you look at it, there's no good weekend. There's always somebody that says so. But the first weekend in September is the one weekend in the ringing calendar where, funnily enough, there is nothing. That is why ringing roadshows have been held on that Saturday.
Right. Can we put it to the vote, please? The adoption of the admin committee report. Those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? No. Thank you very much. There was one over there, right. One abstention. We have Michael Chester and Tony Smith are no longer members of the council, and Michael Church and Derek Simpson retire. There are 4 vacancies for the admin committee. Proposals: Michael Church and Philip Barnes. Are you anyone against that? Or are you all in favour? In favour? Thank you. So they are duly elected to the admin committee. Now, subsequent committee reports, I'll just remind you, they've all been published in the supplement between pages 433 and 447. So I hope you've all read them. I'm very conscious that we have to press on. Public Relations Committee. Kate.
Kate Flavel, Surrey Association. Just a very little to add to the published report. I'm very pleased to say that the new version of Bells in Your Care leaflet for the clergy has been updated and circulated. You should all have a copy of that on your chairs. We're not really intending to keep this as a hugely available paper leaflet, but just to use it electronically. It's on our website. There are some paper copies. We're very grateful to Sue Hall, who joins our committee today, for carrying out most of the design and production work of this excellent leaflet. We heard this morning that the Central Council should get closer to the BBC. The BBC are very keen to have ringing featuring in their Music Day, rearranged for the 15th of June because of the general election. You will have seen information about this, covering the whole of one back page of the ringing world, among other places. Clyde Whittaker has been leading our work on this, and I do hope all your towers are joining in, especially overseas towers, which the BBC is particularly keen to include. This is another of those unexpected opportunities that seem too good to miss, despite creating additional work for us. Other work that we've been doing with the BBC has led to an interview with Dennis Brock on the Radio 4 Sunday programme yesterday, the oldest ringer at nearly 99. Bells on Sunday, of course, is a regular feature that our committee looks after, and yesterday featured the bells from this church. And the BBC also, we had a broadcast manager speaking at our PR Matters Day, which is referred to in the printed report, and it turns out he has a big involvement with children in need and is very keen to see if we can come up with some Pudsey Bear methods, specially created for children in need this year, and we're following that up with him. So watch this space for that. A lot of work we're doing with the BBC at the moment, and I have great pleasure in proposing the adoption of the report. Thank you.
Okay. I would just add that your president was on Radio BBC Glasgow this morning, and back to tell the tale. Any questions for the PR committee? Seconder, please. Neil, you've got a point?
Neil Dodge, Suffolk Guild. I'd just like to thank the committee for their excellent work. I just wondered if, what lessons have you learnt from the media buzz that was created around things like the ringing as a sport, and particularly York Minster, and how you're going to perhaps change the media strategy going forward, because a lot of the York Minster press was focused on what York Minster said. There were quotes from the bishop and things like that, but there was very little from the ringing organisation side, apart from individual York ringers, and criticisms I've received, because I'm the public relations officer for our guild, is that ringing was too slow to act on putting forward our position on that side. I just wondered what you've learnt from that and how you're going to develop going forward. Thank you.
I think that you always learn from every experience with the media. No two scenarios are the same. With York Minster, it, as our president has referred to earlier today, was a unique experience, unique to that tower and that group of clergy and their relationship with that group of ringers. I think our official view, which we put forward very quickly, was that in general the relationship between ringers and the church, as I mentioned earlier today, is extremely good, that we as ringers work very hard to help maintain that, and when we become aware of breakdowns in those relationships, it is extremely sad. It is very hard, as our president found out, for an outside body to the parties in dispute to intervene, a bit like a marriage breaking up, you know, would you march in and give your view as to what should happen or who should do what when you don't know all the circumstances? It was very difficult for the Central Council, and I think that what we have learnt is that we need to, all of us, take away when we get home the need to work hard on building our relationships with our clergy in our own towers and making sure that they are excellent.
Thank you, Kate. Any other points? Bruce? Thank you, Bruce. Second. Other comment over there? Thank you, Bruce.
Anthony Lovellwood, Salisbury. Is this available as a PDF from the system?
It is. It's on the website as a PDF.
As a PDF. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Anthony was referring to the Bells in Your Care leaflet.
Bells in Your Care for clergy.
Any other points? If not, I'll ask. Sorry, Roland. Yes.
Here we go again.
Get your name.
What's that? Yeah, Roland Backus, Bath and Wells. Is the new logo part of the PR? Because, to be honest, when I look at it, I don't see bells, I see skittles. And I have heard of other things that other people see in it. I think that logo really needs to be reconsidered. It's just a mess.
The PR committee had no hand in designing the logo.
All I'd add is branding is part of the Craig.
Yes, I trust Roland voted for that. For proposal I, which is the rebranding exercise.
Doug?
Yeah, Doug Davis, Kent County Association. Just in response to the logo, we actually outsourced that to a professional company. So, so nobody in here can be blamed for that specifically. But, yeah.
If there are no other points, can I move the adoption of the PR report, please? In favour? Any against? Abstentions? No, thank you very much. There have been 4 nominations for the committee: Kate Flavel, Susan Hall, Vicky Chapman and Mike Bale. Are you all happy with those nominations?
Yeah.
Yes? Can't hear me? Right, okay. I'll repeat it. There were 4 nominations for the PR committee: Kate Flavel, Susan Hall, Vicky Chapman and Mike Bale. Are you all in favour of those persons? Yes? Thank you. Okay.
Declare elected.
Yes, declare elected. Okay. Publications, Beryl Norris.
John Cooperthwaite, Guildford Guild, pretending to be Beryl Norris.
You haven't got the legs for it.
I had once, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 quick things to add to what's written on page 437. The first thing is that we are now able to offer the normal discounts with orders via PayPal. And the second thing is that on sale on our bookstall is this new book by Bill Butler, which, if you ask him nicely, Bill will be very pleased to sign for you. With that, Mr. Chairman, the report is as it stands and I propose its adoption.
Thank you. So,
Beryl Norris, Guildford Guild. I'd like to second the...
Thank you, Beryl.
report.
Any questions for the Publications Committee? Are you all in favour of the adoption of their report? Any against? Thank you very much. And we have 2 nominations, Beryl Norris and Jan Wyatt, so I declare them elected to the committee. Redundant bells, Julian.
Mr. May I just add a little bit? The bookstall will be open for a few minutes after the meeting, if anybody's
Right, thank you.
interested.
I'm sorry, Fred. Was there something you wish to raise? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fred Bone, Essex Association. I did try to wave my hand at you before you took... Anyway, I'd just like to ask the Publications Committee if they would be kind enough to forward the PDF of the new decisions booklet so that it can go up on the website, because there have been some adverse comments about the fact that the version on the freely downloadable from the website is the previous 2013 edition. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Fred. The 2016 edition of the rules is available.
We can certainly do just that.
Thank you, John. Moving on. Julian, redundant bells.
Robert Wood,
beg your pardon.
University of Bristol Society. Happy to propose the report of the Redundant Bells Committee. A couple of points I'd just like to add, if I may. The report is on page 437. We would like to encourage all associations, or at least territorial associations, I think, to address the question of redundant bells within their areas, and to have somebody or a committee, an individual, some sort of arrangement for keeping an overview of towers where they are changing use or closing or whatever, and representing Ringer's interest in those situations. And if whoever is going to take on that role would like to contact us so that we can maintain that link, that would be very helpful. The other thing I would like to do is to pay tribute to the work of Bob Cools, who, as you've heard earlier on today, has resigned from council and as also from this committee. He chaired the committee over a great many years. He also acted as secretary to the Bells Rescue Fund. We are enormously grateful to him for all of the work he's done, and I'd appreciate it if council could record that. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
David Westerman, Peterborough Guild. I'd like to second that report.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for the committee? No? In favour of adoption of the report, please? Any against? Any abstentions? No? Thank you very much. 2 nominations for the committee, Ian Hastelow and Helen Webb, so they are duly elected. Ringing centres. Paul.
Hello. Right, Ringing Centres Committee.
Name?
Paul Marshall, Worcestershire and Districts Association. To report that our latest newsletter, Training Times, has been published and is available on the Central Council website, and I'm told a copy will be sent to all reps following the meeting. Our annual survey has been sent to all 41 ringing centres which are affiliated with the council, and the database which we maintain will be updated and certificates issued when we have received the returns. As stated in our report, we are having discussions with the Education Committee regarding closer cooperation in the future. I assume with the changes coming about with Crag, this will come about naturally anyway. As well as the one nomination, unfortunately Phil Bailey's nomination didn't make the cut line, so we have, in our meeting which we held in Birmingham earlier this year, we co-opted him onto the committee, and with that I am happy to propose the adoption of this report.
Thank you, Paul. Barry?
Barry Dove of the Yorkshire Association. My great pleasure to second this.
Good. Any questions for the committee? I'll ask you in favour of adoption of the committee's report, please. Thank you. Any against or abstentions? No. For re-election to the committee, Paul Marshall. is proposed and so is duly elected. The Ringing Trends, as you know, has not been populated since last year. There is going to be ongoing work, and I would make a plea to you on behalf of the incoming President that if anyone is interested in work which will involve looking at how there are so many things which are affecting the ringing exercise, that if anyone's willing to take up the cudgels and do that work as part of Ringing Trends, they should contact the officers. Thank you. Towers and Belfries. Yes, John? You're expressing an interest, are you, John?
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. I wish to ask a question. We knew this time last year that there were nobody willing to stand on that Trends Committee. I think we all agree its work is important for this council. I would like to ask what measures have been taken by the officers in the last year to overcome the emptiness of that committee.
Christopher Omani, ANZAB, just to respond to John. I had some conversations with Elva and Mark Ainsworth quite soon after the Portsmouth meeting to secure the records, the data that Ringing Trends had amassed, and I still have those usernames and passwords so that that data is not lost. We've certainly asked for volunteers to come forward, none have been forthcoming. I've also been speaking with Tim Hine on the Education Committee about the possibility of the work of the Trends Committee to be absorbed into the work of the Education Committee. That conversation continues and will also be absorbed into the ongoing work that we've had highlighted through the CRAG proposals today. As Chris has just alluded, there are trends that we need to be tracking, commenting on. There are the big picture items that we already know are the big issues that we need to act on: recruitment, retention, leadership. And the engagement that we have with external stakeholders, whether that's Church Buildings Council, Churches Conservation Trust, the C of E in general, to make sure that we are proactively engaging with wider trends in our society and the Christian world. So it's certainly not forgotten, John.
Thank you. Towers and Belfries.
Thank you, Mr. President. David Kirkcaldy, Sussex County Association. Our report is on page 437, 438. A couple of quick updates on that. We have held a bell frame recording seminar earlier in April. The maintenance handbook or manual of maintenance, that hopefully will be going to the Publications Committee within the next couple of weeks, and we are in the early stages of arranging a bell maintenance seminar for the autumn. We've had a few requests for one of those this year. And with that, I'd like to propose the adoption of our report.
Thank you. Alison.
Alison Hodge, Worcestershire and Districts. I'm pleased to second that report.
Are any questions for Towers and Belfries? In that case, can I ask your approval for the adoption of the report? Any against or abstentions? No. Thank you. And 3 persons nominated for the committee, continuing Alison Hodge, David Kirkcaldy and Alan Yalden, so they are duly elected. Tower Stewardship.
Hello, Ernie Dinley-Runciman from Lancashire Association. My report is very much as printed. Just a comment based on some of the other comments that have been passed around today about our relationship with the church. Over the past year, we receive a number of inquiries for help and advice, inquiries like safeguarding, health and safety, insurance, etc. And when you dive into it, I would guess about 40 to 50% of the problems that they are reporting aren't so much with those subjects, but the problems are actually with communication with the church. where ringers are not talking with the vicars or church wardens, etc. So, yes, I would very much encourage that we go back and we actually talk to our churches. With that comment, I'd like to propose the adoption of my report.
Thank you, Ernie.
David Mattingly, Winchester and Portsmouth. I would like to second the report.
Thank you. Any questions for the committee? Very important committee to our stewardship. It covers a lot of legislation and interface with outside bodies, which impacts very greatly on ringers. It's very important. Can I ask...
Before I go any further, can I pay tribute to yourself with the vast amount of work you have done on safeguarding?
Thank you, Ernie. Can I ask your approval of the adoption of the report? Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you. And one nomination for the committee, one Chris Mew, whoever he is, so he can carry on his work. Bell restoration. Peter?
Thank you, President. Peter Wilkinson of the Chester Diocesan Guild. I just crave your indulgence for a moment before I address bell restoration matters, just to say a very public and sincere and brief thank you to those who voted for me in the election this morning. And lest there be any doubt, my enthusiasm for bell ringing and for this council is undiminished by the result, and I wish David Kirkcaldy every success.
You're not going to ask for your £5 bribes back, are you?
Now to important things, the Bell Restoration Committee report. The report is before you on pages 438 and 439, and I trust you've all had a read of that. Just a few updates since the report was prepared and published. Blackborton, who received £57,000 from what was CETA and now Suez, that project is still on course to complete by September of this year. So that's obviously very good news. We are sponsoring, I'm not sure sponsoring is quite the right word, we're providing the material for the Ringing World calendar for 2018 as another avenue to try to get the message out there to as many towers and ringers and indeed non-ringers as possible about our aspect of the work of this council. So I commend that calendar to you, and I trust everybody in this room at least will be buying a copy. You'll remember a couple of years ago that we received a very generous legacy, and we decided, because of the amount of money involved, that we would actually distribute grants in 2 tranches. We did one tranche in 2015, and most of those projects have now completed. And we have awarded the second tranche of grants in February of this year. So all of that money is now committed to various projects, and those have been published in the Ringing World, so you should all be aware of where they are. Similarly, Fred Duke's fund, we usually, that's a capital fund where we only have the interest at our disposal. We traditionally invite applications round about November, December, with a view to receiving applications and awarding grants at our February meeting. We had one eligible application, so a grant was awarded in February, and that also has been published in the Ringing World. We've had feedback from some projects that have been adversely affected by the Whitechapel situation, and obviously any help we can give to those projects to resolve those hiccups, we will be more than happy to do. Last year I reported that Stella Bianco was wishing to stand down from the Jigsaw project, which has been a very valuable source of income to us. Stella's been very helpful in sort of handing over responsibility of that project to the Bell Restoration Committee, and it certainly is our intention to continue with further editions in the series. And of course we can obtain reprints, so anybody who's missing that vital one to complete their set, if you let us know, we'll see what we can do for you. I did thank Stella last year in her absence, but I'd now like to do so again in her presence. I think she's around somewhere over there. So Stella, thank you for all your work on that project, and also for all your assistance in handing over the project to our tender care, and we'll do our best to continue the good work. I don't like to mention names particularly, but one name does need to be mentioned, that of Chris Rogers, a former secretary to the council and latterly for a number of years a member of our committee. Chris has stood down from the council this year and therefore from our committee, and we are obviously very grateful for all his hard work and wise counsel while he was a member. He has offered any assistance to us if we want to avail ourselves of that, and I'm sure we will be in the future. You've seen our list of bullet points for ongoing tasks. That's our sort of bread and butter business, if you like, and those largely will continue. Personnel change, people need to be reminded, those things are sort of standing items, more or less. Future work, we do intend to hold seminars in the future to take our work and expertise and advice out to projects in various parts of the country. So that's continuing on the back of the successful seminar in 2015. We will be availing ourselves of some outside advice to update our guidance note for charity registration, VAT and gift aid, and as I've already mentioned, the Ringing World calendar and the jigsaws. Just one point that's been mentioned previously today several times, that of diaries. We try to publish our meeting dates on the Bellboard Diary feature and previously on Campanifile as well. And it's regrettable sometimes when there are clashes of date. I know it can't always be avoided. There are only sort of 52 or thereabouts Saturdays in the year. But it would be advisable for people organising, particularly council events, to look at that diary and see what else is already in there. So with that, Mr. President, I would present the report and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Peter.
Jay Bunyan, Bath and Wells. I'd like to second the adoption of the Bell Restoration Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions after that fulsome report? Helen?
Helen Webb, Ladies Guild. I have a general question about bell restoration grants. They generally include clauses that the restoration has to be for the to advance the Christian religion. Now we've got an increase in secular rings, and we're also looking at the change of use of some church buildings in the future. So, what is the committee or the council going to do about changing the terms of these funds so that monies can be granted to secular and other rings?
We'd be very happy to look at the terms of reference for the grants. The priorities for grants are published every year as to where we would aim the money if we need to prioritise. But I do take on board the point that there will be, I'm sure, in the future, many more rings that are not church rings as we understand them at the moment. So thank you for that. We will take that on board.
And I have a second question. York Minster put into sharp relief that even though ringers fund largely bell installations, they can be blocked from having access to those rings. Is also from being on redundant bells, looking at the closure of churches and the fact that those bells become the property of the church to dispose of, what clauses can we put on grants such that if the change of ownership or change of use, such that, and this applies to associations giving grants as well, that actually that money can either be returned to the awarding body or that access is maintained to those bells after the church has been closed or an ownership has changed.
Yes. Robert Wood has, and Chris Sharp have already got the whole question of redundancies and arrangements with access to redundant bills. We are in the process of setting up a sort of joint committee with Church Buildings Council to look at that whole question of caveats and safeguards for ringers.
How soon is that going to come out? Because associations are still giving grants of, I mean, Kent County gives out up to £10,000. How soon is this going to come out into the ringing community such that we're not losing control of things that we're paying for? And I'm not sort of saying that in terms of we've got to maintain access, but we are paying for these assets and then we are losing control of them.
I think it would be very difficult to put a condition on a grant for an active church in the possibility that it might be redundant 20 years' time.
Yeah, but I think in terms
it's got to be taken as situations are at the time grants are made.
Yeah, but if it's going to be within 5 years' time, then that is money that could be reclawed.
Right. Point taken, but so it is being looked at, Helen.
President, if I might add a little bit to that. Following the Redundant Bells Committee meeting, which I think was yesterday, the Chairman, Robert, spoke to me yesterday about those sorts of issues, and I said that we would be happy to consider those points at our next meeting, which is on the 10th of June, so only a couple of weeks away. It is a difficult area, as you've said, Mr. President, but we're certainly very happy to look at it and see whether we can make any progress on that. I do understand the point that you're making, that if significant money is given by ringers through either the Central Council Fund or association funds, whether there is anything that we can do to safeguard the access and use of those bells when circumstances may change at the church. If only for a certain period of time, perhaps.
Good, Peter. Any other points? In that case, can I... Sorry, one more. Yes, Duncan?
Yeah, Duncan Walker, Carlisle, Dorset and Guild. On that point of possible conditionality on grants, can I just suggest that instead of reinventing the wheel on that, you look at other grant-making bodies' approach to that conditionality, such as the Big Lottery Fund. Having managed a Big Lottery Fund grant, I can tell you their conditions are kind of voluminous, and so, you know, rather than reinventing the wheel, just suggest you look at how that's handled by other grant-making bodies.
Yeah, thank you for that. We will certainly take that on board, Duncan.
Any other points? In that case, can I ask for your approval of the adoption of the report? Any against? Abstentions? No. Thank you very much. There are two persons nominated for the committee, Peter Kirby and Pat Alwan. I declare them elected. Biographies. Biographies? Come on, John.
I went up too soon. You were talking about it later, so I hastily picked up the treat. John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. A few things have changed since we wrote our report at the year end. Superficially, there are now 950 records on the website rather than 941. More significantly, the recent ones, we have not had to send them to the ICT committee to put them up for our benefit. With an introduction of a new website, we can now, within minutes of having produced the PDF, get them online without putting any imposed load on the ICT committee, and that is a significant step forward. In our report, there was a rather long list of possible future plans and aspirations. Several of those we are making some progress on. One particular that we aren't, and I'd like to put down the Peal. We would like to make the bridge between ringing history and the outside community of family history societies. We believe there's a productive link there, But anybody who's involved in that world, who's involved in family history societies, who could help us work out a way, for instance, to write an article that they might find of interest, I would please get in touch, because we think if we could get to the point where people doing family history, the standard guidance says, look at BMD, have they got any military because they have records, were they a bell ringer because they've got good records. We'd like to link ringing into the wider fabric of society and social history. And we do that by forming bridges, but we don't quite know how to form the bridges at the moment because we haven't got those connections. So if anybody's got those connections, please get in touch. And with that, I'd like to propose our report.
Thank you, John. Richard?
Richard Andrews, St Martin's Guild. I'm happy to second the adoption of this report.
Thank you. Any questions for the committee? Can I ask then for your approval of the committee's report? Thank you. Any against? I would just remind you, as John did earlier on, if any of you hadn't had your mugshot taken, he would be grateful for you to pose for the police after the meeting. Thank you. We have two nominations for the committee, David Jones and David Willis, and I declare them elected. Compositions. Richard.
Richard Alton, Ancient Society of College Youths. A couple of comments on the report. You note that all our updating of compositions submitted goes to Don Morrison's website. Those of you who aren't aware, Don has done quite a major revamp of his site this year, mainly in the last month or so, which means we're having a bit slow putting things up, for which we apologise. And if anybody has any suggestions of things they would like us to do articles on, please let us know. With that, I'd like to propose the report as it is on the paper.
Thank you, Richard. Paul?
Paul Flavel, Surrey Association. I'd like to second the report.
Thank you. Have you any questions for Richard and Paul? All happy? In that case, can I move the adoption of the report? All in favour? Thank you very much. Any against or abstentions? No. Thank you. One nominee for the committee, Andrew Johnson, duly elected. Education, Mr. Hine.
Mr. President, fellow ringers, trying to be brief. You've got the report there. Tim Hine, North Staffs Association. Apologies. Trying to be fairly brief here, there are 4 highlight things that have arisen since this report was written. Everything that we've been doing has come much more under the microscope, and we are much more into working with others. As the report mentions, we welcome the involvement of other organisations. Working alongside those is going to be an increasing focus for us. There are 4 points to make. Leadership, which we plan to do more work on this year. Support for associations, this is down to what people want, really. And Pip Penny and Clyde Whittaker, who we have already co-opted, have agreed to head up that. So if you have ideas of what you would like, do contact them, please. We had ringing trends mentioned earlier on and ringing centres, and we are quite keen to do what we can on both those areas. That's it.
Thank you, Tim. Second that.
Lucy Hopkins, Till, Oxford Diocesan Guild. I'd like to second the adoption of this report.
Thank you, Lucy. Any questions for the committee? No? In that case, can I move the adoption of the report, please? In favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Abstentions? No? Thank you. And 3 nominees for the committee, Lucy Hopkins Till, David Hibbert and Clyde Whittaker, who are duly elected. Information and Communications Technology.
Hi there, David Richards, Cambridge University Guild. It's been said several times today already that it's impecunious to mention people who've put in special effort. However, here we go again. Particular thanks to Doug on my left, Andrew Hall, and also Caroline and Clyde, who put in excellent effort to get the new website to where it is this year. Hopefully people can agree that it's a good step forward. There's a lot more work to be done, but hopefully everyone feels confident in using the new site. If they don't, get in touch with us. Also, in terms of special thanks, I'd like to say an extra special thank you to the Scottish Association. They've provided us a fantastic venue, and the facilities that have been provided for running today's meeting. And Craig Collin up there, stand up and take a round of applause, because it's been absolutely great. Absolutely tremendous amount of effort has gone in, and we've received a lot of positive comments. A lot of positive comments about the quality of the streaming that's gone out today, and it's a level that we will really struggle to provide in the future. That leads into the next point, which is that you've read the report, but really the focus for ICT this year will be working out how CRAG affects us and where the division is going to be between what is currently ICT and what will become in the new structure. So without much else, I would commend this report to the Council.
Thank you.
Doug Davis, Kent County Association. I second that report.
Thank you. Have you any questions for the committee? Roland Backhurst.
Normally, Roland Bacchus, Bath and Wells, yet again. Normally, I throw brickbats at people. This time, I'd like to compliment you. I had a problem when I first logged into the new website. There's an awful lot of flicker. I emailed you about it, and it was corrected very quickly, especially on the larger screens that people tend to use at home. I don't know whether that was just a case of you've done some of it on sort of smaller screens when you're developing the system or not. But yes, congratulations on such a quick response.
Thank you, Roland. Any other comments? Yeah.
Christopher Omani Anzeb, I also would like to add to the compliments, not the brickbats. So my compliments to all the members of the ICT committee, a tremendous year's work.
Thank you. And I wouldn't speak out of turn. IT is the new window for our ringing activity. It's already proven itself with access through the website, and it's going to be a big leader in the coming years, and with the proposals being looked at by Craig. So I'll commend the work. Can I have your approval to the adoption of the report? Anyone against? No? Thank you very much. And one nominee to the committee, Peter Harrison, duly elected. Library Committee.
Alan Glover, Shropshire Association, a poor substitute for Linda Fotheringham. One of the first publications by the Library Committee back in the last century was a CD of the Trollope manuscript, which is about 7,000 pages of the history of ringing. One or two users have pointed out to us that your modern computing contraptions don't use the same format that we used to produce that. The response was for mainly Paul Johnson to get on with reformatting the whole thing. It's now available on the new Central Council website and is being well used. We also acquired another volume of Trollope's work, this time on his Science of Change ringing, and the 400 pages of that have also been scanned and added to the Central Council website. If you're deeply into the science of ringing, as it was in 1922, I'm sure you'll be fascinated. As well as the ongoing projects, which we try to keep up with, we did have the possibility of a project to do with Peal boards. We wanted to collect at least a sample of those in image form and make them available. We had a good long think about this, and because of doubts about whether the committee will exist in 12 months' time, who the members will be in 12 months' time, we decided that we would not take on a prospective long-term project because the people who replace us may just knock it on the head. So that one we have put into abeyance. If we like what CRAG does and we end up with a situation where we feel it's viable, we'll pick that one up again in a couple of years' time. The report's on page 441. I propose it.
Thank you.
Ian Self, Truro Diocesan Guild. I'm pleased to second adoption of the report.
Thank you. Any questions for the Library Committee? Very important committee. It's something that's there in the background. We've probably got the best collection of books on ringing anywhere, even taking into account the British Library. And we should appreciate it and take care of it and use it. Any questions? No? In which case, can I move the adoption of the report, please? In favour? Thank you very much. And 2 nominations for the committee, Sue Marsden and Paul Johnson, duly elected. Methods Committee, you've heard quite a lot of that from Peter Niblett, but we'll let him get up on the stand again.
Here I am again. Okay, thank you, everybody.
No hissing, please.
Right, I'm not going to... I think we've discussed quite a lot of the things that are in the report, but there are 3 points I would like to make. First of all, to say thank you to the new members we had, new team that we have joined the Methods Committee. We had Mark Davis join last year, David, my seconder here, Graham John, who you've heard from already, and Tim Barnes, who's in the US. And I think we have really good momentum going. We've been using new tools to help us do that, and I would like to make sure that momentum carries forward as we go on to CRAG. So thank you for that. Secondly, I do need to point out that now we've talked a lot about the value of having the methods collection, online methods collection. That does really rely on us having a robust set of decisions. So I think we need to be very careful that going forward we have decisions that allow us to unequivocally maintain that collection. Now, third point, on a kind of personal note here, we'll note that Tony Smith is no longer on the council. I know that he's been regarded as the enemy by a number of people, particularly outside the council. He has suffered quite a bit of personal abuse from people, but I think we as a council ought to recognise the enormous effort that he's put in. The fact that we have the online collections today is really entirely due to his initiative and drive. He's put a huge amount of time, as well as his own money in hosting the websites. And I think that his contribution should not go unrecognised by the council as we go forward. Thank you. With that, I would like to propose the adoption of the report.
David Grimwood Kent, happy to second that.
Thank you. Have you any questions for the Methods Committee? In that case, can I ask for the adoption of the report, please? In favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you very much. And there are 5 nominations for the committee. Derek Williams, Graham John, Andrew Johnson, Tim Barnes and Lee Simpson, all of whom duly elected. Peal Records Committee. Richard again.
Richard Alternation, Society of College Youths. The report is the biggest one you can see, ranging from quite a few pages. One correction I've been notified so far on page 446, the peal of Julia MacDonald, new Bob Triples, despite being wrong in Peterborough, was actually should have been for the ELDA. The second thing I'd like to just mention is all this data that we provide has been generated mainly from the good work that Bill Hibbert I was part of the Ringing World Board from peals.co.uk, and we are in discussions with Richard Smith and the Ringing World Board for taking that forward using Bellboard. And with that, I propose the report.
Thank you, Richard.
Chris Turner, Lincoln Guild. I second this report.
Any questions for the Peal Records Committee? Can I ask for your approval for the adoption of the report, please? Thank you. Any against? Abstentions? No? Thank you. And two nominees for the committee, Chris Turner and Alan Baldock, duly elected. We now have the reports of the stewards. The stewards of the Carter ringing machine collection, which you'll find on page 446.
Ready?
Sorry? Yes, right. You're there. Hello, Bill. Carry on.
Bill Purvis, ex officio. The report is in the papers and I recommend it to you. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
James Blackburn, Beverley District Ringing Society. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, James. Any questions for the stewards of the Carter ringing machine? No? Okay. Can I ask for your approval for the adoption of the report? Thank you very much. And we have stewards appointed, Bill Purvis and James Blackburn, duly elected. Thank you very much for your work. Report of the Steward of the Rolls of Honour.
Thank you, Mr. President. Alan Regan, ex officio, Steward of the Rolls of Honour. The report appears on page 446 of the supplement. And since the production of the report, there has been additions. I'm very grateful to Robert and Will of the Ringing World for continuing to publish these Rolls of Honour. April, May and June 1917 have now been included. It mentions in the report that I have 22 new names to be added. This has been increased considerably, and I'll perhaps explain what's been going on. So, my research has now 23 new names, and the 23rd one is a chap, Private Frederick Lawrence, who died on the 19th of June 1917, who was a ringer here in Edinburgh, down in Leith. So he is the latest addition. He will be commemorated with hopefully a handbell peal in the church hall, which is now the church down at Leith. David Willis, a member of the Biographies Committee, has decided to look at newspaper reports that appeared back through the war years. And indeed, many of these, it has been found, mentions bell ringers. I've often said that I believe there are hundreds of names to be gathered. And what David's research has shown is this is a week's work that he's undertaken, looking at all the online newspapers that there are. Not every newspaper is online yet, but more are coming as we speak. He has found 36 ringers from Devon alone who are not remembered in the Roll of Honour already, and extending his search 55 from elsewhere across the country, making 114 new names to be added to the Roll of Honour. This will continue, and I'm sure we are finding some of these several hundred that I've mentioned. One of these, a chap called Private Herbert Rowland, who came from a place in Devon, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, but Thrushleton, and he was in the Devonshire Regiment, and he was killed on the 1st of July 1916, first day of the Battle of the Somme. And he's buried in a particularly important cemetery on the Somme, which contains just over 100 graves. They were brought back in from no man's land by the chaplain, and this is the Devonshire Cemetery. All but one belonged to the same Devonshire Regiment, 8th Battalion. The other one is a Royal Engineer. They all died on the 1st of July 1916. And I was particularly keen that we would find a ringer from Devon amongst those, and we now have. And just people that we should remember, as we did last year, on the 29th of May 1917, there were 2 ringing casualties that we know about. Sergeant Ernest Edward Sherlock from Runcorn in the Chester Diocesan Guild, who's buried at Runcorn Cemetery. He died of wounds from the war. And there's Private Hugh Chapman Nash of Old Swinford, Worcestershire, and he is buried in Baghdad, the Northgate Cemetery there. So we remember those 2, particularly today. They died 100 years ago today. I'm happy to take any questions if you would like, but I'd like to propose the adoption of the report.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan? Peter?
Well, more a quick comment. The Runcorn ringer that you mentioned is due to be commemorated by a court appeal attempt this evening, which I was invited to take part in, but as I have a Ford Focus, not a TARDIS, I wasn't able to accept. So he should be commemorated with some special ringing today.
Thank you, Peter. Was there somebody else over here? No? Robert Wood?
Robert Wood, University of Bristol Society. Mr. President, I'm in awe of the work that Alan does on our behalf. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I see from the minutes from last year, I seconded his report last year, and I'm delighted to do so again this year. I'm just staggered by the amount of work he does, the detailed knowledge he has, and the help and support he provides to all of us in order to enable us to remember these people from 100 years ago. Thank you.
That comment, Robert. I think I would echo what's already been said. Apart from the information and research which you've done, Alan, it's enabled so many communities across the country through their bell ringers to mark individual ringers' lives. And I think it's that community sense of involvement that has been so important. And we have a great debt of gratitude to you for that. Can I move the adoption of the report, please? Thank you very much. And pleased to declare that Alan is reappointed as the steward. Thank you. We now come to the Steward of the Dove database. Now, John Baldwin, who has been the key Dove steward, along with Tim Jackson, for a long period of time, has retired. He couldn't be here today, but I did go down to see him in Cardiff the Friday before last, and we made a presentation to him, for which Tim was present. We haven't got a photograph here, have we?
Well, I sent them.
Oh, right.
Have you got photos? I sent them to Terry.
Oh, there we are. Well, that's not John. That's actually that's Beryl, and there's John and Tim. John and myself. We presented him with a certificate and some tangible gifts as well. And I think it's only right that we recognise the tremendous amount of work which John has undertaken over the years in compiling, building on the original Dove data, compiling the database, getting it online, and of course assisted very ably by Tim Jackson, who has done a tremendous amount of work as well. There is a transition period because I think I said earlier on that the Dove database is being transferred to a secure modern program server, but in the interim the transition we're having 3 stewards, and Tim Pett has been proposed, Doug Davis, and obviously continuing Tim Jackson. Anyway, would you like to say anything, Tim?
Hello, Tim Jackson, ex officio. I think the only other thing to say is that in the interim, John and I will be carrying on with the existing system until the new system's up and running. Apart from that, propose the adoption of the report.
Thank you. Any questions for Tim? No. Propose the adoption of the report, please.
Need a seconder.
A seconder? Yeah. Yes. Seconder, please.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Fred. Right. In that case, can I move the adoption of the report, please? Thank you very much indeed. And
could we give John?
Sorry?
Even though John might be watching, could we give him a round of applause?
Yes, yes. In case John is watching on stream, I think we ought to give him a round of applause. Okay. Rescue Fund for Redundant Bills. We've already had one thing on it.
No, Rescue Fund is currently a separate charity.
Yes, right.
Robert and Helen.
Robert and Helen. Conferring.
It's currently a separate charity.
Yeah. Are you going to come and speak, Robert, or just speak from there?
Robert Wood, University of Bristol Society. I'd like to propose the report for the Bells Rescue Fund, which we've already agreed to close down. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any comments? Anyone? Seconder?
Helen Webb, Ladies Guild. I'd like to second the report.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? In that case, I'll move the adoption of the report, please. Thank you very much. Okay. Future meetings. Have you got anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
No, you've already heard about Lancaster. Okay. Yes, yes. We've had an invitation from the Irish Association for 2023, which has been acknowledged and will be considered in due course in relation to future arrangements. If there are any guilds who would like to invite the council to locate in their areas, somebody waving there. Okay, right. Right, I'll now ask Mary to just give us a rundown on the attendance list, council.
Right, okay. So there are 31 societies fully represented here. That's under half, with 85 members present. 27 societies partly represented, with 68 members present, and 8 societies not represented at all. So that's 153 representative members present, 5 life members present, 3 additional members, and 6 ex officio members. So the ex officios get a clean sheet, 100% attendance record, and that's a total of 167.
Thank you, Mary.
And I'd like to thank Stephen Franklin, Carol's husband, who beavered away compiling this while we were talking about other things.
Thank you. Right. First of all, do I have your agreement that ballot papers be destroyed? Thank you. And Mary, I think, would like you all to return your badge holders. She gets threepence back for each one. Mary, do you have something else?
I think this got mentioned earlier when somebody said they didn't actually know what the date would be for next year's meeting or something like that. The nomination deadline for under the current rules committee elections or additional membership for next year's meeting. It's 28th of March. The meeting is the 27th, 28th of May. If the meeting formally opens on the Sunday, then the nomination deadline will obviously be adjusted to suit and would become the 27th of March. I've just got a few more points as well. I know you're all getting twitchy, but bear with me, please. Right, at the beginning of each triennium, we try and obtain a snapshot of the number of ringers in our various societies. This is actually particularly important in the absence of people currently working on trends, and well, we hope that that will change. There's a document on the website. There are lots of gaps. A number of societies merrily paid their affiliation fees but forgot to actually fill in the form or tell me how many members they've got. I caught up with the change in the Durham and Newcastle with their decrease in membership fairly recently. If your membership increases, of course, under the current rules, you are entitled to more representative members to increase your voice on our deliberations. I would really, really appreciate it if everybody could take a look at that document on the website and email me so that we can fill in the gaps. I have got one or two, the Durham and Newcastle and the Oxford, to fill in anyway, but it would be very helpful as we look at ringing ahead to fill those in. We caught up today with the fact that Anne Anthony has resigned as a Central Council representative for the Guildford Guild. There do seem to be a few glitches occasionally in who is responsible for telling us things. So if things change in your area, I don't mind how many times I'm told. I'd rather be told 3 times than not told at all, please. So keep the emails coming in. And I'd like to apologise to Cathy Thorley because I omitted her name this morning from the list of new members, so she didn't get the chance to stand up and wave to us then. So my apologies to Cathy. Derek wanted to say a word.
All right, okay. Right, now I believe Derek Simpson wanted to say a word.
Microphone, please.
Wait the microphone, Derek.
Mr. President, thank you. Having been thwarted this morning from saying something which I wanted to do by the fact that Mary was returned unopposed and therefore did not need a speech, I would like to explain that she has now been Secretary for 8 years and Carol has been her assistant for the last 3 years, and I would like to propose a vote of thanks to them for all their hard work over many years.
Yeah. Right. It's now my turn to say some words of thanks. Of course, the thing is with those that are sort of re-elected and carrying on, you tend to sort of not get the chance to welcome them as officers. But my thanks go out to all the fellow officers who've supported me over the last 3 years. They've all been a tremendous help, and it's been a great privilege to work with them. I'd also like to thank all members of the Council, especially those who served on committees. Your work is often not appreciated by either your societies or ringers at large, and it is important. I'd like to thank the stewards of the Dove and Rolls of Honour, etc. And to all your individual support, which you've all, in various guises, given me over my term of office. And now it's a duty to, and pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to so many people that have made this weekend enjoyable. It's given me great pleasure to come to Edinburgh. Those of you at the dinner last night will know that I was born in Scotland and I suggested that we should come here for my last meeting. So it's a great pleasure to be in Scotland. Thank you from all of us to the organising committee of the Scottish Association, Simon Aves, Barbara Bell, Ian Bell, Mike Clay, Jonathan Fry, Jenny Holden, Ruth Marshall, Colin North, Ruth Ogilvie, Tina Stocklin, and especially to Terry Williams, whose name you probably had most to do with. I'd like to thank also all the members of the Scottish Association who manned the reception and help desk, to the ringing members at the various towers who acted as stewards and made us so welcome, and to association members who acted as stewards at St Andrews and George's here. The tellers for the ballots, microphone operators up in the gods, and all other association members of Scotland who have involved in any way with the arrangements. It's been absolutely superb. We must also record our thanks to the Minister of St Andrews and St George's, Reverend Ian Gilmore, particularly for his humour last night, for leading us in prayer, and his kind words of welcome at the dinner, and for the use of St Andrews and George's West for the meeting. I think you'll agree this is almost an ideal layout for a meeting. There's none of you too far away that you can't throw tomatoes. Hopefully, with or without the microphones, you can all hear well. It's not been too hot or too cold, and absolutely brilliant. Reverend Callan John McCluckie, Vice Provost of St Mary's Cathedral, for the evensong and at the Cathedral, and the use of the Walpole Hall for our meetings on Sunday afternoon, and indeed to all the incumbents and ringers of local churches who've made bells available during the weekend. So a great thanks to all of them. And now it's...
now, before Chris moves on, it's my turn. So I speak on behalf of all those present. So sit down. It's a good start, isn't it? Okay, so today, as we all know, is Chris's last meeting as chair of Central Council, as president. We all know that Chris has got a deep affection for ringing and a boundless enthusiasm for its well-being. He, over the last 6 years, has shown enormous energy and commitment, demonstrated by his willingness to participate in ringing-related activities all over the country. These include committee meetings, seminars, dedications, funerals, board meetings, and much, much more, either very much in the foreground or working tirelessly in the background. He continues, as you know, to be the Council's subject matter expert in all things related to safeguarding, to which we're greatly indebted to him, and we know that this will continue. Thank you, Chris. He's pursued his own Ringing for the Future reform agenda with determination, striving to reach out to associations and individuals and ringers at all levels. A particular highlight has been such things as organising the events surrounding the 125th anniversary of the Central Council, so closely linked to Sir Arthur Hayward, events such as the first Peal 300 event, and many more. In his own personal life, Chris is a devoted husband, father and grandfather. He's a man of deep Christianity, of deep honesty and humility, bringing his warmth, wit and wisdom not only to these meetings but to many other ringing forums, and as a great help to me personally. So Chris is going to be a hard act to follow, but I know that I speak for all of us here on the Central Council to propose a vote of thanks to Chris and to pass on a token of our appreciation.
Something for Anne as well. I won't call you down. Well, thank you very much for those kind words, Christopher, and that gives me great pleasure to pass this badge of office over to you. I hope that people will give you the same support in your term of office as I've had in mine. Congratulations and best wishes for the future. And I can now declare the meeting closed.
Your first Australian, and I hope not your last.